When I was growing up, Christian spaces for children like Sunday school, youth group, camp, VBS, small groups, rec leagues, and private school were typically assumed to be safe spaces by the parents who would drop their kids off and leave them under the supervision of other adults they didn't really know and oftentimes hadn't even met. Hi, everyone. If you're new here, my name is Andy and my pronouns are they, them. Today on the pod, we're going to be talking about predatory spaces found within Christianity. These spaces opened up access to kids for adults who ranged from merely inept at youth care to actual predators and groomers. This episode of Morning Thoughts is going to touch on sexual abuse, predatory relationships, and the way purity culture contributes to the ability for these things to happen. If you need to skip this one, I totally understand. Please take care of yourself. Maybe go watch a different one of my videos. But before you go, be sure to give this one a like. From a trusted relationship that crumbled instantly the moment my 13-year-old chest was pulled close and pressed against him while he held me in a supposedly congratulatory hug, to a mission trip in a foreign country at 16 where we had no supervision at night, which led to me being introduced to alcohol and gropey Canadian tourists, to being alone at 17 with my 21-year-old guy friend from church in a hot tub where his hands felt free to just touch me in places I'd never been touched before, to my first real time away from home at 18, where during the first month of school at Bible college, I would meet the first person who forced me into intense situations that did not involve consent. Not that I was even aware of the concept of consent at the time. To my first real relationship at 19 that was founded on manipulation and sexual abuse, where I thought I had to marry him because of what had happened to me. To the progressive church I tried at 26, where the pastor who tried to kiss me when we were alone, setting up the chairs before a service on Sunday morning, had claimed that God had set him free from sexual addiction. To my next try at a real relationship at age 29 that was familiar in all the wrong ways that my brain had been trained to feel were the right ones. I had many run-ins with unsafe and also downright predatory Christian spaces and with predatory self-identifying Christians. Accurate statistics on the prevalence of grooming and abuse within Christian spaces are challenging to obtain due to underreporting and oftentimes even cover-ups by the spaces in which they occur. These things aren't exclusive to any particular denomination. It happens everywhere. Grooming and abuse can occur in any environment, not just religious ones, where adults have access to vulnerable children and teenagers. I saw it happen to other people several times throughout my high school and college years, and I was still so sheltered and lacked so much agency that I didn't realize the time sexual assault or predatory behavior happened to me until much later in my own life. As far as cover-ups go, I can remember hearing about the widespread prevalence of sexual abuse that had been covered up in the Catholic Church as far back as when I was in high school in the early 2000s. In recent years, there's been an exposure regarding the systemic sexual abuse within the Southern Baptist denomination as well. A specific cover-up that comes to mind, though, is that of John Ortberg's former congregation, Menlo Church, a 4,000-member megachurch in Northern California. I'm going to read an excerpt from religionnews.com that covered the story, and this was written in 2020. In the summer of 2018, a volunteer at Menlo Church came to the Reverend John Ortberg seeking help. The congregation member who volunteered with youth and children at the Bay Area megachurch and in the community had been experiencing an unwanted thought pattern of attraction to minors and needed the pastor's support. After hearing this admission, Ortberg asked if the volunteer had ever acted on that attraction. The volunteer said no. Once Ortberg was convinced the volunteer was telling the truth and was not a danger to others, he prayed for the person and offered a referral for counseling, and then allowed the volunteer to continue working with children. In what Menlo Church's elders would later call poor judgment and a betrayal of trust, the megachurch pastor did not notify the church's staff of the volunteer's admitted attraction to minors. He did not notify the church's elder board. He did not suggest the volunteer stop working with children. In fact, the pastor and his family encouraged the volunteer in his work as a coach of an ultimate frisbee team for high school students. Instead, Ortberg, the lead pastor of Menlo, kept what he had learned about the volunteer secret from his congregation, especially the volunteer's name, Johnny Ortberg III, the pastor's youngest son. And of course, you will not be surprised to know that it did come out that he had acted on that and that there were victims of his choices. I can't even. There's a really popular book called #Church2 by Emily Joy Allison that talks about how these things are not confined to certain denominations and how it's widespread. In case you want to learn more about this and hear more about the stories of actual survivors and you want to know Emily's take on this, I will read you the synopsis of her book. When Emily Joy Allison outed her abuser on Twitter, she launched #Church2, a movement to expose the culture of sexual abuse and assault utterly rampant in Christian churches in America. Not a single denomination is unaffected. And the reasons are somewhat different than those you might find in the #MeToo stories coming out of Hollywood or Washington. While patriarchy and misogyny are problems everywhere, they take on a particularly pernicious form in Christian churches where those with power have been insisting since many decades before Me Too that this sexually dysfunctional environment is in fact exactly how God wants it to be. #Church2 turns over the rocks of the church's sexual dysfunction, revealing just what makes sexualized violence in religious contexts both ubiquitous and uniquely traumatizing. It also lays the groundwork for not one, but many paths of healing from a religious culture of sexual shame, secrecy, and control, and for survivors of abuse to live full, free, and healthy lives. If you have gone through something like this, I highly recommend this book. A lot of reading and research on your own can help you so much more than you even know. I'm living proof of that. So let me once again encourage you to read #Church2 by Emily Joy Allison. I can only hope all Christian spaces have gotten more serious about things like background checks at bare minimum since I was a teenager. But in my experience, Christian youth organizations are led by trusted adults, such as pastors, teachers, or camp counselors, who are put in positions where they can easily exploit their trusted positions of authority. I've seen it happen more than once. When I say trusted, though, I mean automatically trusted because they are someone in a position of authority at a church or a Christian school or a Christian organization. I never heard any parental concern from mine or anyone else's parents over the people they willingly left their children with for many hours a week. Some organizations may lack proper oversight, background checks, and training for volunteers and staff, making it easier for abusive individuals to gain access to children. Aside from these safeguards and standards, people in higher positions of authority need to be not only checking up on, but working hand in hand with these leaders and be able to observe and tell for themselves whether there's rot within the youth group or within the Christian school or any of these predatory Christian spaces. And another thing, many preschool and elementary Sunday school classes, junior high youth groups, and church activities are supervised or put on by older kids. Again, hello. When I was in late elementary school and junior high, I was teaching preschool classes on Sunday nights. When I was in high school, I was the responsible party for the junior high Wednesday night group. My friends and I were counselors for week-long camps and had our own classes for VBS. I wasn't trained in first aid and CPR. I hadn't attended Bible college or seminary or even some kind of training class on working with children. Now let's think about the lack of resources and support made available to the survivors of these predatory people in spaces. Stigmatization of discussing these sensitive topics within religious communities can prevent victims from coming forward because they fear judgment or disbelief. We've seen it time and again with Me Too. When someone comes out with a story, they are raked over the coals and forced to relive that trauma in order to even attempt to achieve justice. Youth groups, schools, and camps often create tight-knit communities, making it easier for perpetrators to isolate victims and maintain secrecy. Grooming and abuse can have devastating and long-lasting effects on victims. They may experience emotional trauma, depression, anxiety, loss of trust in authority figures and institutions. This type of abuse can also lead to mental and practical arrested development, in which it makes it extremely difficult for the survivor to move beyond where they were when the incident occurred. I spent the entirety of my 20s and early 30s feeling like there was something wrong with me and that there was something wrong with my life because I couldn't seem to make my life look the way everyone else's appeared on the outside. I felt extremely stuck mentally, physically, emotionally, career-wise, relationship-wise, and just personal growth-wise. So much of my early adulthood was spent in survival mode that I couldn't do more than the bare minimum required of me to get through the day. And I want better than that for other survivors. Just now at 38, it's really only been over the last couple of years that I have processed enough and been able to work through my stuff and get the support I need, that I'm able to actually divert some of my brain power toward creative endeavors. And that is one of the reasons I'm able to actually do this channel now, which is really exciting. The reason I started this channel was to create a community of ex-evangelicals who have already been through the slog of deconstruction, made it out the other side, and have the desire and ability to help others get through it faster and with more healthy tools than we had. If you have any stories you'd like to share with me about the topics covered today, I'm here and I'm available to chat on Instagram at @AssignedChristian@birth. If you'd be interested in sharing your own story on a future episode of the Deconstruction Zone, leave me a comment and we'll chat. Thank you so much for listening to something that's really been weighing on me and something that was really vulnerable for me to talk about for the first time. I know I didn't really go into detail. That's for a reason. It's the first time. Getting a little bit of it out there, and that's what matters. And now we've come to the point of the pod where I talk about the books I've been reading this week. I've been reading People's History of the World. I just finished People's History of the United States recently. I'm about that far through People's History of the World. It is so good. Again, it's approached from the aspect of, labor and capitalism and protests and the stories of Indigenous people and other people of color that are typically not told in our normal school history books. There is a chapter in here on the rise of Christianity. There's a chapter on the Reformation. There's a bunch of different little mentions of all the different schisms and wars and crusades. There's a lot of stuff about Christianity in here. It's really interesting to me to be reading it from the secular perspective. Obviously, I've read many books from the secular perspective at this point, but most of the ones I read are actually deconstructing the theology, deconstructing the things that we were taught were true that aren't even in the Bible, things like that. This is an actual history book that contains commentary on those things from that perspective, and I just find that really interesting. Another book I'm reading right now is called After the Ice. You can probably tell what this is about. Basically everything from the last ice age on. Ancient civilizations has become one of my special interests lately, mainly because, when maybe earlier this year, I thought to myself that it would be really interesting to investigate the civilizations and cultures and societies that we have proof of existing from before 6,000 years ago. Why 6,000 years ago? Because fundamentalists believe that the earth was created around 6,000 years ago, Garden of Eden, right? But the fact that we have actual proof of people living on this planet long before that time is just really interesting to me, because obviously I was not taught that growing up. There's a difference between knowing that something from fundamentalist evangelical Christianity is wrong and knowing the truth of it. For the most of my deconstruction period, I have known that's not right. In this instance, the 6,000 years thing, but this has happened a ton of times, countless times, if I'm being honest. I've gotten to that point where I know it's wrong, but I don't know what's right. And so the bulk of my academic efforts over the last 3 years or so has been learning the actual truth of history, of science, of the world around me. And I'm just really grateful that you're here on that journey with me. Thank you for watching. If you would like to support me, please like the video. It really helps the algorithm. What helps even more is if you were to subscribe and hit the bell notification so that the algorithm knows you really want to see my videos when they come out. If you'd like to support me further, I do have a Buy Me a Coffee. Monthly or one-time donations are super loved by me. Appreciate you in advance. That's buymeacoffee.com/assignedXTIAN. If you just want to chat, message me on Instagram at @AssignedChristian@birth and leave me a comment here. What is the wildest thing that you have learned the truth about since starting to deconstruct? I'm looking forward to reading your comments. Thank you for stopping by Morning Thoughts. Bye, guys.